Hi, my name is Ninad. A few months ago, I read a book called Misfit Madhu written by Divya Anand. This book has been nominated for New Book Award 2023 for junior readers. Today, I am speaking to Divya Anand about the book. Hello.
Hi,
Good luck for the Neve Book Award.
thank you so much. I'm very excited about it because I think when I was thinking about my first children's book, I had heard about the Neve Book Award then, and I thought, I'll write a lot of books and maybe one of them will get nominated at some point. So I'm actually very excited that this one got nominated.
Okay, so can we get started with the questions?
Yes, let's get started.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Your growing up years, did you love books as a kid, etc.?
Sure. So, yes, I will start by saying I definitely loved books. I still love books. In fact, people who have gone to school with me, who have gone to college with me, even people who work with me know me as that person who normally enters any place with a book in my hand. So, I tend to read as much as possible, even when I'm walking and things like that. So, you'll see me reading until, like, if I'm coming to office, I'll be reading until the point I come to my desk, and then I'll keep the book away. So I think it's a little bit of a superpower that I don't run into things or get myself into accidents where I'm reading and walking at the same time, but I do that. So even as a child, I really, really liked books. I spent a lot of time just reading, especially during vacations. So I grew up in the Middle East, and for vacations, I would get sent to India to my grandparents' place for, 1 month, 2 months, however long the vacation was. And my favorite activity used to be going to the library, getting a set of books, and then just sitting and reading all through. So that's pretty much how I grew up. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why there was a part of me that always wanted to write, though I never thought I would become an author. Of course, other than that, I did obviously I didn't like sort of formally get into a writing sort of a field outside of writing books. I actually work in tech. I'm a product manager now, but the writing is something I do on the side.
Okay. How did you get the idea of writing a story about a schoolgirl who likes to code?
So, like I said, I work in tech. So, I obviously see a lot of people who code. By the way, I don't code. Product managers are people who basically define what the tech should look like and how it should work, how people will like to use it. We don't really need to write the code. Engineers do that. And interestingly, I'm also not an engineer, but because I'm surrounded by people who write code at all times, I do also spend a lot of time thinking about, if you build a particular product. So, say if you're making an app, what are the ways in which that app can be used, but also what could go wrong? Because there are a lot of considerations around things like, okay, if you are getting people's information, are you keeping it secure? Are you not keeping it secure? How are you sort of ensuring that whatever you build is being used for good, right? And it's not being misused in some way. And because I work on that kind of a space a lot, I always thought it would be interesting to think about, if somebody at a young age, right? Especially now, I think a lot of people are getting interested in coding. I know a lot of kids that I know who are sort of interested in coding and building apps and whatnot. And my thought is like, if you are making it, I think the challenge, or at least the thing that I have typically seen, is everybody focuses on, oh, I made an app. Nobody focuses on, oh, if I made the app, did I think through all of these things on how does the app work? Is it doing the right thing? Is it not doing the right thing? So I thought it would be fun to put a spin on it, to say, okay, if you don't think about a lot of this and just make an app, what could go wrong? And then I really like mysteries, which is why there's also a little bit of mystery in the book. But that's where the idea came about. It basically just started as, okay, what if a child made an app? And just, most people make apps this way, right? Like, oh, I think this is a good idea, I will just go make the app. And you don't really think deeply about it. Then what could happen? What could go wrong? And how could that become an interesting story? That's really where the idea came from.
Okay. Are the characters in the story similar to anyone you know? Who is your favorite character and why?
I don't think the characters are really similar to anyone I know. I think what I do generally is that, and this doesn't apply just to my children's books, it applies to my other books as well. I think I just like to really observe people and what they're doing and what they're saying. And I think one advantage for me with Misfit Madhu is I actually wrote it after I had my daughter. So every evening when I used to go down, pushing the pram or taking her out in the evening, there are a lot of children of the age of the characters in this book who play downstairs in my apartment complex. So I just sort of lurk around, listen to their conversations, see how they talk to each other. So that inspired a lot of how people in the book talk. But other than that, there's no real inspiration. Like Madhu isn't like anybody I know. Noor isn't like anybody I know. It was more of, I was just sort of thinking back to, when I was in school, what were the kinds of people who were in the class, right? Some people used to be very studious. Other people used to like sit in the back bench, try to play around. So I just sort of like drew from all of that to create the characters in the book. Um, if I think about favorite characters, I think I actually have two. One is Madhu herself, because I think this whole piece where she feels like a misfit, she doesn't really know how she fits in. I think that is something that everybody has felt at some point of time in their life or the other, right? And including myself, when I was younger, I've had that phase where I felt like I may have had friends, but you still feel like somehow you feel like, oh, everybody else is somehow in that zone of getting along with each other more. Somehow I'm not fitting in the best. So I think that feeling of Madhu is something I've definitely empathized with. But my favorite character beyond Madhu is actually Noor, because for me, I think Noor is the kind of friend that I wish I had when I was a child, but it's also very difficult to be like Noor, right? This internal compass that she has, where she says, even if everybody says we want to do X, because I know it is not the right thing to do, I will still stick to my guns and sort of like do what I think is right. I think that's something that's very, very difficult to do, especially at I think that age. So that makes her one of my favorites, because I wanted her to sort of be a strong character, but also not be a preachy character. Because sometimes the people who are like that tend to feel very preachy, and then you're like, oh, this person is just trying to tell me what to do. So that balance, I think, came out pretty well in Noor, and she's a great friend. So that's actually why she's my favorite character, because I aspire to be a friend like that, and I think everyone should have a friend like that.
The coding storyline makes me feel this story is based in Bengaluru. Is that correct?
Actually, I don't think it's so much about the coding. I think the school Sante is where it comes from as well. Like Sante is also a Kannada word. So yeah, I didn't necessarily try to place an exact place on purpose, but a lot of it is very much, I think, centered to things in Bangalore also, because I've been living here for a while. So I think that's where it comes from. So I didn't want to obviously say it's Bengaluru, but yeah, it could potentially be, because there's a lot of aspects that are sort of weaved in that are from here.
Okay. Why did you call this book Misfit Madhu?
I actually did not mean for it to even be the final title. I think when I first started writing the book, as a working title, I just did Misfit Madhu. I think actually the way that it happened is I wrote the synopsis of the story, and then I started writing the first three chapters. And when I wrote the first three chapters, the first chapter was just very much about that, the app going viral. And then there are all those pieces about how she feels like a misfit and how she doesn't fit anywhere. So I wanted it to be misfit something. And then I just picked the name Madhu because I was trying to like also keep the two alliteratives. I was like, okay, misfit what? And then that's where Madhu came from. I did put it as a working title, thinking that, if I came up with something else later, I would change it. But I think by the time I finished the book, it just felt like the right title. So that's why it's Misfit Madhu.
Okay. How did you get the idea of bum wailing dance? I found it very funny.
I by the way cannot dance at all. I'm a very bad dancer. And when I came up with, I actually came up with the song first, the Professor Pareto, that song. And I wanted a song because, Lohit to me is the kind of person who is very much sort of into like singing and dancing and just trying to be funny, right? He's sort of the class clown. So I came up with the song first, and then I was like, if someone like Lohit is in this moment where he has discovered that he's suddenly going to top the class because he has just discovered this leaked question paper, then what kind of dance would he do? And because he's a little rude and he's not like trying to follow the rules, I thought it would be fun for him to basically basically, all the things you're not supposed to do when you do a dance in class, jump on the table, turn around. And then I was like, now he should just shake his bum, because that's also something that everybody would say you shouldn't do, right? So everything that you could possibly do that you're not supposed to do went into that dance. That's how I came up with it.
How has your experience been taking the book to different events and your readers?
I've had a lot of fun. I think for me, it's also been the first time I got to do this, because what happened was that my first children's book, I Hate My Curly Hair, it actually came out in March 2020. So literally, the book was on pre-order, and then the lockdown was announced, and it actually went off from distribution. So I actually have emails from the first set of orders that people I know placed, which all got cancelled because nobody could figure out distribution. And then it eventually went out, I think, only by around July or so of 2020. But because of the lockdown, and because none of us knew how things would shape up with COVID at the time, even the events that were done for that book were all virtual. So I only got to do Zoom events. So even though I had an activity and all of that, I think the interaction is very different, right? Like, you're sort of doing it on Zoom. You don't get to talk to people live. So and the difference that I've really seen between that book and Misfit Madhu is, like, when you're doing it live and you're talking to the readers live, even somebody who's shy, sometimes after seeing other people participate, will come up and, like, want to show what they've done, want to show off how they have approached the activities. They'll want to ask you questions, they'll want to talk about it. And if someone is really shy, what the advantage you get is that, once the event is over, people often come up to me. They will be like, can I talk to you alone? And then they will ask me things. None of this was possible with the first book. So I have really enjoyed going to events. I think Misfit Madhu, I did events at Bukaru in Delhi. I did events uh, at a school fest in Bombay. I did an event as part of Bangalore Literature Festival. All of them were very well attended. I had a lot of enthusiasm for the activities that we did. I think you were also there at the Bangalore Lit Fest once.
Yeah, I
So
was there.
so we did the activity. Everybody came and spoke to me. It was a lot of fun. I've also done a few school events, both with Pika Book as well as with Funky Rainbow. So all of these have been really, really enjoyable for me, as I get to talk to people, as I get to hear what they say. And every time I do the activities, I get new answers, I get new questions. So it's been very, very enjoyable. And everywhere I've gone, I must say that the feedback I've got has also been very, very positive, right? Like, people love Madhu's character. A lot of people love Noor. So that's also been really good for me as a writer, that people have really liked the book.
Are there any other backstories to this book that you would like to share?
Um, there's no real backstory to the book. I think, like I told you, the book was basically came out of this idea that I had, that, if somebody were to build an app and didn't think about it in school, how could it go wrong? So that's where it really came from. The reason that it's a trading app is, of course, kids like to trade. A little bit, like, some parts of it, like, how do you actually, like, set up the interface for someone to buy and sell, or for someone to sort of exchange things. Some of it is a little bit inspired from the fact that, of course, I've worked at Amazon in the past, so I do know how e-commerce apps work. But there's no real backstory to it beyond that. The reason that it's a middle grade book is because I just happened to attend a middle grade writing workshop during COVID. And then we had to come up with a book idea at the time. And this idea was something that had been lying in my mind. And I was like, let's see if this will work for middle grade. So that's actually how it became a book for the age group that it is. It could have potentially also been maybe a chapter book, a little older aged book, but that's where it came. But there's been no other, I think, backstory as such with Misfit Madhu.
Okay. How did you get into writing? When did you write your first book?
So I actually used to blog a lot, and I always said that I would never ever write a book, because I always felt that writing a book is very, very difficult. I felt that writing a book requires a certain level of skill that I didn't think I had. And my husband actually used to keep telling me that, what, you should try writing a book, because I think you'll be good at it. You read a lot, your writing is good, people like your blogs and things like that. And I was like, no, 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 I don't want to get into it. And then it so happened that Bangalore Literature Festival has this event. So as part of Bangalore Literature Festival, anyone who's has a book idea can submit a synopsis, and then they pick 20 of these ideas to come and pitch to publishers. And if somebody is interested, they could potentially, like, take the conversation forward. And in 2017, when this was happening, I had this vague idea for a book, which actually was again because of my husband. So my husband basically really likes to eat. He's a foodie. So he was basically going around the world eating all kinds of bizarre food, and he had actually made like this big food chart where he categorized it, like, by species, almost like your science textbook, right? It started with vertebrates, invertebrates, and then it had like this full chart of, oh, these are all the species I have eaten. And one of my friends at one point had said, you travel so much and you keep wanting to explore all of this, you should actually, put this up somewhere and, crowdsource it. People might be interested in knowing of these adventures and all of that. So when the Bangalore Lit Fest call for this book idea came about, I wrote a synopsis, a chapter breakup, and said, uh, what if there was a guide to eating bizarre food from around the world, right? What if that was a book? And I just put an entry, and I actually literally did this entry 5 minutes before the deadline expired. So I literally submitted it that late because I hadn't thought about it. I just randomly got this idea over Diwali break and did it. And then I actually got selected to pitch. And I did pitch, and a lot of people found it super interesting, which is how I got introduced to my editor at Penguin, who actually eventually published that book. That book is called Dare Eat That. It came out in 2019, and that was my first book.
Okay. What are you writing next? Any plans of another book on Madhu?
I have some ideas which could potentially become another book on Madhu. I think every event I've gone to, everyone has asked me, will I write more books about Madhu? I do want to, but I think the way I might approach it would be to potentially write maybe the stories centered more on the other characters, and Madhu sort of is part of it. Because if I write another Madhu book, I don't want it to be yet another like app that she creates and something goes wrong, because it might just end up sounding very similar. But what I'm actually exploring next is a different book. It's probably more of a chapter book, still potentially for around, I think, 7-8 years of age, which is a different struggle for a different girl. Yet again, I think I just like writing about girls with strong opinions, but yet again with a girl, it's sort of more related to a health issue. So we'll see how that goes. I literally just had a conversation about this a couple of days ago, so I still have to flesh it out and see if this actually even becomes a book.
Okay. What else do you like to do? Hobbies, interests, etc.
So like I said, I do work full time as a product manager. In terms of hobbies and interests, outside of writing, I also like to sketch a little bit. So there was a point of time where I used to post a lot of my doodles online as well. I had an Instagram handle where I used to post my doodles. I haven't posted in very long, but I do draw. I have done things like, make invitations for like weddings, birthdays, and others for like close friends and family. So sometimes I draw. I also really like aerial yoga, which I talk about. So that involves a little bit of hanging upside down, which I really like to do. So that's another hobby that I have. But that's about it, because these days, beyond that, I think most of my free time, if I'm not writing, goes towards just spending time with my daughter. She's 2 years old, so she has a lot of things that she likes to do that she needs me to do with her, like, making puzzles. She likes to read books, so that's what I end up doing with her.
Okay. Last question I ask everyone who I interview. Can you recommend some books for me and young readers like me?
So there are a ton that I would like to recommend. I will start with something that I read earlier this week and I really enjoyed. So Jane D'Souza has a book called Flyaway Boy. I think it was also either on the shortlist or I think a winner of the Neve Book Award a few years ago. I just read it a couple of days ago. I really, really enjoyed it. I've also really enjoyed, while it might be for slightly, I think maybe 10-plus-year-old potential, maybe even a little older, more 9th or 10th graders. But I really enjoyed Loki Takes Guard by Menaka Raman. I also really like Bijal's writing. So Help My Eye Wants to Eat Me, as well as Savvy and the Memory Keeper. They're both books that
I've read Help My
I found that hilarious. It was a lovely book. It's one of my favorites. So yeah, I think there's a lot, and my favorites also keep changing because I'll read a book and then I'll be like, oh, I really like this. I like all of Anushka Ravi Shankar's books, though, and I'm waiting for her to come up with something new. I think it's been a while since I've read a new book by her. So yeah, I just enjoy all of these books.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great chatting with you, Ninad. I really enjoyed it.